decisions or enforcements.
So jumping right into the background to give you guys some context. These are newsstand structures, also known as Edicole in Italian. This one on the left is the original structure, and as we progress to the right, this is more modern. However, these ones are still in business. These ones are mostly closed, and they sell newspapers and souvenirs. But the main difference between these newsstands is those ones are governmentally owned, and these ones are privately owned, but still delegated by the government.
The newsstands are seen as community hubs, or at least they were in the past. Right here's a picture of a bunch of people getting their daily newspaper, and they're all like around the newsstand, kind of just conversing. Versus here, there's a lot more tourists around the newsstand, and they're not really conversing around the newsstand. And this makes sense due to the fact that readership in newspapers has declined. This top line is at least once a week, so if people are reading their paper once a week, their daily newspaper, their weekly newspaper, they're not really committed to reading it, so there's a much steeper decline at the end right there, versus the bottom line has the daily readers, so they're a lot more committed to reading their daily newspaper and going to the newsstand every day to purchase it.
And so with the decline of readership, the newspaper sales have also decreased, which has allowed the vendors to explore new products to sell. And with the change of Venice society towards tourism, these products now include tickets, concessions, glasses, and souvenirs such as magnets or little trinkets. And it's something that vendors have to keep in mind are some of the regulations, which include that 55% of the surface area of the Edicole have to have magazines or newspapers, and the other 45% can be any of those products in this area. And so with these changes of society, which include the newspaper decline, the shift towards tourism, the newsstands had to adapt, which has led to an unfeasibility of these newsstands year-round, as tourism is really prominent in the summer months. So in the off-season months, these newsstands are not generating a lot of revenue, which has caused a lot of the newsstands to disappear. In the year 2000, there were 36,000 newsstands within Italy, and today there are only a third of those remaining. This is evident within this image here. This newsstand here was in Giudecca in 2019, and since has been dismantled. You can see the outline of where it used to be right here. And so this could be for a multitude of reasons, as if they don't adhere by the regulations of the 55% surface area rule, they are dismantled, or if they're not keeping up with the change towards tourism, they're going to be dismantled as they're not selling anything.
And so to prevent this from happening, our goal was to assess existing newsstands and propose sustainable ideas. Our initial idea was to implement advertising on street furniture as Edicole are street furniture, which also includes benches and boat stops. As you can see in this picture, this is actually outside of Giudecca's boat stop, and so it'd be a great idea to collaborate with advertising companies, as Edicole are street furniture, and furniture is 1% of advertising.
In the past, we saw different repurposes, such as quotation for a bunch of buildings, and then there's also book exchanges, community news boards, and partnering with nearby businesses. With that, we're going to get into our methodology as to how we carried out our project. First, we had to identify the locations of the newsstands themselves in order to analyze them. So the Vulcan Interactive is a directive that was put in place in 2018, and we use that as the initial list of newsstands to go off of to then find them in Google Maps Street View. This is the list. This is the Excel spreadsheet. This is the Excel spreadsheet that we use, and they're color coordinated by Sestieri. And then this is the map. We concluded the map has all the finalized newsstands based off when we walked to find all of them based on our initial map that we made before.
And so while analyzing all of the locations, we were analyzing the surroundings. And so on the left here is a newsstand in Castello, which is where there's benches and a park, whereas over here, this is in San Marco, which is a very touristy area, so it's more around restaurants and cafes. And so after we found all the locations, we were going to analyze the social interaction. And so throughout the day, we started 9 to 5 to pick the peak hours of operations. And through each hour of the day, we looked at the most popular items sold by tracking every then we also looked at whether it was locals or tourists engaging in the newsstand. And to look at the engagement, we had a three-tier pyramid of hierarchy. So at the bottom, bystanding is anyone that walked past the newsstand, maybe did a double look to see how many people are actually looking at the newsstand to see potential for repurposes. And then next was browsing and interacting, which was anyone that browsed the newsstand by scanning, touching, or talking to the vendor. And this allowed us to see what was actually drawing people in. And then the highest level is buying something, and this allows us to see the economic feasibility of the newsstand.
An additional thing we did during the first week of our investigation was interviewed some vendors to get an initial understanding of the Edicole's operation. This included asking questions about what the most popular item was, least popular item was, and how many customers they would expect in an average day. This helped us get an initial understanding of what to look for in our initial observations to help us pick up that would best be suited for our in-depth observations. And so using the status that we found in the social engagements, we wanted to propose some new alternatives. And so one of the ideas was advertising. And so we first wanted to see how prominent advertising was currently in the Edicole newsstands. And so to do that, we highlighted which advertisements, or which Edicole already had advertisements, where they were. For example, here, you can see they're all on the perimeter. We also wanted to know what products they were advertising towards. You can see here, they're for the tickets that the Edicole are actually selling, which was good to see. And then another thing we wanted to see was how prominent they were on this structure itself, if they're taking up too much space. We also wanted to interview on repurposing, so there's that benefit that Megan talked about, quoted Dion based on Milan. They've already repurposed 20 newsstands, and so we wanted their expert opinion to see how they go about it and what information they could shed light for us. And so we wanted to interview them as they already did a lot. We also wanted to interview the vendors to get their insight on what they thought of our repurpose ideas, such as a art gallery or a book exchange, just to see what they thought about our potential ideas.
So taking into consideration our methodology, here are our findings. So bystanding is the highest percentage of what we saw of engagement at 75% compared to buying and browsing at 5%. This makes sense. If you saw our pyramid, bystanding is the highest level at the bottom. This also makes sense because when people are browsing, people are more likely to watch what they're doing. It's called the bandwagon effect. And as you can see, this trend line, the reason why bystanding is higher is because of foot traffic in the area. If it's a popular area in San Marco, there's going to be more foot traffic causing higher bystanders, whereas here in Costello, less foot traffic, less number of bystanders.
So with that, we were able to analyze the sales at each newsstand. Clearly, newspapers have a much greater sale compared to tourist items, miscellaneous items, concessions, and tickets, which is interesting with the newspaper readership declining. And with that, we also found that active members of the community tend to have more successful newsstands because they're outside of their newsstand conversing with customers and trying to engage with everyone versus non-active members of the community are kind of just sitting inside the newsstand on their phones, not really paying attention to anything around them. So the active community members tend to have more successful newsstands. And with that, newsstands are also placed in tourist-based locations, so it makes sense that for this graph, all the peaks have a lot more tourists than locals, except for Costello 8, which is in a local area, so it makes sense that there's only locals around it. And it's also interesting to see that there's much less locals at each newsstand, but they make up most of the sales at the newsstand due to the fact that most of the sales are newspapers.
So based on these findings and analysis from our initial observations, we have to make some conclusions. First off, as we noted that newspapers were the most prominent sale, it was interesting to see that newspapers sold more in the morning than the afternoon, which makes sense as locals are on their way to their jobs or going out for their leisurely walk in the morning buying their daily paper. Something more interesting to see is how all the other sales, which include concessions, miscellaneous items, and tourist items, stayed consistent throughout the entire day, which is partly due to the fact that the tourist foot traffic doesn't really change throughout the day, and it's always a constant flow of tourists walking around. Additionally, we kind of realized that the newspaper decrease is not necessarily the primary reason the newsstands are failing, as they are making the primary reason of profit from the newsstands that are making most of the sales. You can see here there's actually only 3 newsstands that didn't have newspaper sales as the most prominent sale. All of the other ones looked more like the ones on these 3 to the left. making up most of the sales.
This is a map we made based on the sales, so the different dots represent the different amount of sales at each newsstand. So this one down here in Costello, it's a local newsstand owned by a husband and wife. They engage with all their customers, they talk to them, they have relationships with them. And this red one, it's again high sales. It's a very interactive newsstand. It's owned by a father and son who have owned the newsstand for 42 years. They built a relationship with all their customers, and they're constantly outside their newsstand conversing with locals and tourists. So the conversation around the newsstands and with active members of the community tend to have more sales.
Something else we looked into was the feasibility of these newsstands financially. We took the average prices of all the products, including newspapers being around €1.20, souvenirs being around €5, and miscellaneous items being around €8. We used that factor for all of the sales at these two locations to factor in how financially feasible they are. And so one of these is an active community hub area versus one of them is not. And would anybody like to guess which one is which one is the active community hub? Yes, the one on the right is the active community area. They promote a lot more sales as the vendor is bringing in a lot more engagement, bringing people in, promoting sales, versus the one on the left is someone sitting inside, not tracking people, just letting the sales come to them. And so something to note here additionally is this did not bring in a lot of revenue. They're under €100 total, so it's not really financially feasible at all, as they haven't even factored in the price of the products to buy them or the wages of the people. This is just pure revenue, so not really financially feasible.
So with that, we're going to get into some of our recommendations for the newsstands. So they should build on their current strengths. For instance, owners that should stay engaged, and owners that aren't engaged should start to become engaged with their customers and start kind of talking to them. And then with the location and surroundings, they should take advantage of it. If they're in a high tourist area, they should be selling the tourist items, versus if they're in a local area, they should be selling more local items like newspapers and trying to cater towards the locals. And then product arrangement also plays a huge role. For instance, one of the newsstands we observed, there was a child nearby, so then the newsstand vendor moved a toy into the child's iPad, and then the child ended up going up to the newsstand where she asked her father to buy the toy for her, and then that was a sale that the newsstand made. So these owners have to stay very engaged and watching their surroundings.
Additionally, we'd like to propose the idea of a new regulation that adheres just to Edicole rather than all newspaper outlets. Because right now, the current regulation kind of limits the Edicole in terms of all processes. The 55% newspaper surface requirement is not truly necessary for the newsstands, as locals already know what newspaper they're getting, what Edicole they're getting it at. So there's no reason to have anybody browsing newspapers if it's already predetermined what's going to happen. So we'd like to recommend that there be no surface area requirement and instead have a requirement of just selling the newspaper itself. Additionally, there's a very strict product list that the newsstands have to adhere by. We would recommend expanding that to newer items so that newsstands can explore new alternatives and routes to find financial stability. And additionally, if they don't adhere by the regulations, they're closed and then further dismantled, which we do not see as a good idea, as there's a lot of opportunity for repurposing these after they're not succeeding anymore.
And so as Griffin was saying, we should expand the product list, and this could be seasonal items such as candles for All Saints Day or Christmas ornaments for Christmas. We also recommend expanding to local shops that should sell Murano glass to showcase Venice's local stores, or games to showcase community engagement. And instead of dismantling newsstands, we recommend to repurpose them. And so this could be community book exchanges, or place for artists to display their music and art, or it could be a tourist information center. They could sell tickets for local events like the Valley Art Festival, or they could put advertising as we suggested before.
Our project was only able to cover 15 newsstands in an in-depth analysis when there's 32. So these are both maps. These are the 15 we observed, and then these are all 32. So a future project analyzing the rest of the newsstand would be beneficial to understand the full scope. In addition to this, a continuation in the summer would be beneficial because we started analyzing the newsstands right here in October, where there's a decrease in tourism. So newsstands in the summer, when there's a lot of tourists during their potential peak sales season, could be beneficial to understand them more. and then the governmentally owned structures are these newsstands. And we did not observe these. It would be beneficial to observe them because then a lot of them are closed down so that the government might be able to put them to use.
We want to thank our advisors, Fran and Ruth, for all their support and feedback during this term, and our sponsors, Michele, Fabio, and Serendipity, for their guidance during this term.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
When you guys were collecting your data, how were you able to tell the tourists from the locals for those numbers?
Yeah, it was a little unclear at first, but with some help of Fabio and also just getting out in the field, we kind of realized a lot of common factors, such as one, tourists often wear backpacks. You don't really see that with the locals as much, instead they're carrying trolleys, if anything, for bringing stuff. Additionally, only locals buy newspapers. The tourists don't have a need to get updated on the Italian news. So that was an easy way to figure out if it was local versus tourist for sales. And we made sure to check this during our first week of investigations. We did it as a group in 2 pairs of 2, where we split up separately and then tracked these throughout the day. We got back to each other to ensure that we were collecting the same amount of data. And in the end, we were very close. And although there is some uncertainty with this, we do believe we got it to the best of its ability. Any other questions?
Hi guys. When you explained about the repurposing, right? Did you check about licenses, for instance? Because you shared that you would be able to have an Edicole sell some of the items that that you're proposing. Because I know that here in Italy, it can get quite tricky with certain items and certain products.
Yeah, there are a lot of regulations in place for changing what operations can be done